I'm Brian Rothenberg, Executive Director of ProgressOhio.org.
Describe what happened here today.
You know, it was really unique here. It was a little different. All these have different flavors. Here we had 15,000 people coming in, and they weren't, it's been portrayed more as a labor rally, but there were a lot of non-labor folks. Most of our members, for instance, a good majority are non-labor. But the State House actually wouldn't let people in. And so it got to the point this afternoon where I was talking to my lawyers and talking to the minority leaders of the House and Senate, and we were actually talking. They did a press conference and said that we would probably file, and we were getting ready to file an injunction to try to get the doors to the State House open. I think it's really disturbing when you see what's going on overseas to see the State House doors locked. I think that what really made Wisconsin a democratic process is that at least they opened the doors there and let people in. Gradually they finally let 500 people in, and then they let a couple other groups of 400 or 500 people in, but they've still left a lot of the doors locked.
Why are people showing up in such numbers? What is at stake with SB 5?
You know, I think the misnomer here is that it's only about labor and only about collective bargaining, but I think people are starting to feel that this last election, you know, for instance, John Kasich won by only 2 points in the last election. The problem is that some of the legislation they're trying to put through is so extreme at so many levels. It's not just attacking unions, it's attacking anybody that he felt like didn't approve of his agenda. And it would be like just because you win office, you go to the extreme and try to just wipe out all of your political opponents like political payback. We have one bill that was called the Heartbeat Bill when it comes to choice, and believe it or not, even Right to Life is opposing this bill because they think it's too extreme. We have a gun bill that's so outrageous. I mean, this gun bill allows for you to bring guns into liquor stores as long as you're not drinking at the time you're in the liquor store, and even worse, it lets you bring guns into open-air stadiums. So anybody who's a football fan, if you've seen, you know, the Dog Pound or the Jungle in Cincinnati, and if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is the chief rival of both teams, I'd hate to be a Steelers player on the field if people had guns in the stands. These are just an example of it. One of the other worker bills that they're putting through that's a non-labor bill, they're trying to pass something that allows small businesses to force their workers to take comp time instead of overtime. So this is a very extreme agenda, and it's undoing a lot of the things that have been accomplished in the last 15, 20 years.
A lot of people say, well, these are the results of elections. Elections are elections, and your side lost.
Well, you know, most of these protections have been in place, the right to organize since the 20s and 30s and 40s. You know, they're long established. Many of the other protections, things like child protections, things like minimum wage protections, things like you know, overtime and protections of wage, those came forward back in Teddy Roosevelt's time. They were actually a Republican idea. That's how extreme these things are, and they're really pushing back. And I think people are starting to feel it, and they're waking up, and they're saying, you know, a lot of people stayed home in the last election. In some ways, this revolution was as much about people staying home as it was about people going to the polls and voting for these folks, and they're waking a lot of people that were slumbering.
You just used the word revolution. What do you think is going on here in the Midwest right now?
What's happening here really is unique. It's not totally unrelated to what's going overseas, and that technology is playing a role in it, both online blogs and Twitter and people feeding off of each other and giving each other information. But it also, when you really look at it and you sort of start to understand it, is about people finally being able to feel empowered on their own. This is not exactly like a union bringing in a bus. These are people that are just showing up. These are people that are calling me on the phone with ideas, people that are coming in from all over. And I think the height of the worst of it was when they locked the doors on those folks, because you know, you don't see rallies this size, and we haven't seen rallies like this in Ohio since the Vietnam era and sort of post-Kent State and those type of things.
What happens next? What happens tomorrow?
Wednesday, we're going to have more rallies, and we're going to have more folks around town. But they're not having any hearings. They are having other hearings on some of these other bills, so we're just as busy not only on Senate Bill 5, but we're busy fighting back on a lot of these different bills. Thursday, apparently, they're going back to committee. I don't think they have the votes on the bill as it is right now. They're going to have to figure out whether they can compromise or not. But we do have a very stubborn governor. The first thing he said after he was elected, he had a meeting with all the lobbyists 2 days after the election, and he actually said, and I can't believe he said it, but you can actually look it up. He said, "Get on my bus or my bus will roll over you." And that's kind of the way John Kasich rolls.
Finally, are you in contact with progressive groups in other states, with trade unions in Ohio,
Well,
Wisconsin?
I'm in contact with a lot of the folks in Wisconsin just because we're through Progress Now. There's One Wisconsin Now, which is part of the Progress Now network, a great organization out there. And then also there's Wisconsin Citizen Action, which is also related to us through U.S. Action. So we have had sort of kindred spirits, and we've gone back and forth on email and gone back and forth and discussed different things. I think there's a little bit of a different flavor in both places, only because Wisconsin just seems to be at least more open to allowing people into the state house and those type of things, whereas here they're playing a lot of games because we're the second one there. So they're doing things like on Friday they told us that you couldn't apply to be a witness. Thursday was the deadline. Well, they told us on Friday, the day after the deadline, that was the deadline. They waited until 4:30 on Friday to tell us when the committee hearing would be today. They waited till tonight to tell us when the committee hearing is going to be on Thursday. So they're playing a lot of games that they can play because they know that, or they're afraid of the public. And I think that's the problem with this, is you don't want to hide from the public. If you're ashamed of the public and you're ashamed of what you're doing, then find a compromise. And that's the real problem here, is there's no effort at compromise.